All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us, Trevor, and thank you if you are watching this video after our presentation today. We are excited to talk about our KC Water Small Grants Program that promotes KC Water quality education. And so just a little bit about what we will cover today. Let me go to my slides here and move it forward. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the intention behind our education and outreach program, go over a little bit about our grant, some of the history and some of the timeline that we're hoping to meet this year to implement the grant, best practices, so kind of giving some tips and tricks that help really promote, being able to provide enough information for our selection committee so that we can look through the grants and kind of know what we're reading, a little bit more about understanding city contracts, because once you're finished with the grant process, it then moves into the city grant and contract process, and then if there are any questions. So we will get started. And again, any questions at any time, feel free to toss those in the chat. So part of what we do is we want to make sure that we are addressing any pollution and runoff into our watersheds. We have a lot of local watersheds in Kansas City that all feed into the Missouri River. And so all of the runoff from our city obviously is running into local creek streams, hitting those watersheds, making it to the Missouri River, the Mississippi, the Gulf, and the ocean. And so what we know is that there are everyday impacts on our water quality, that we see any runoff that's collecting any pollutants, any litter, any plastic, any trash. If it's on the ground, it's in the water. We know that we are hoping to have an impact on improving our water quality by addressing everyday impacts that people can do. So addressing those little concerns, addressing any of the contaminants, addressing anything that might run into our water by implementing best practices that people can do and using our education and outreach to promote that. And so with KC Water, we have our KCWE program, Kansas City Water Education, that talks about different grades and grade levels that teaches water quality education. They're hands-on activities. They promote understanding watersheds. They understand runoff and how it works and what are things that people can do. And so part of our efforts at the water department is reaching as many participants, both from pre-K all the way through high school, all the way through adults, any community groups, any church groups, any neighborhood associations. We really want to reach out and promote that education to help people make better choices about, maybe some of the fertilizer they use, or understanding how plastic might impact water. And so that's some of our efforts at the water department. And we thought, what a great way to support our community partners with this grant program so that they can expand that education program. And so that brought about our KC Water Grant. So our small grant program started in about 2015. It's meant to support nonprofits, community groups, school groups alike to be able to provide that water quality education. We're hoping that with many voices all promoting water quality, that outreach effort is just expanded across Kansas City, that we're reaching people that are able to help support water quality and better impact that water quality in the city, because then we know anything locally then has a global impact. We also are looking that the grants kind of expand what KC Water does, so that people that come up with ideas of ways to promote water quality in unique ways that provides outreach to communities in ways that KC Water is not doing, is really the hope and the intention with this grant, that people are able to expand that outreach through these efforts, and that we're able to partner because KC Water, again, has all those resources, if we can help support and provide those resources to our community partners through this grant, so that we can provide funding with the grant as well as any resources from our education programs. And so a little bit about the timeline. The grant was posted to our city website. Today's the pre-bid meeting, and we're asking that all of the applications are into our office by June 9th, which is a Friday, 4 p.m. And I will talk a little bit later on about, just making sure you have enough time to get that to us by that deadline. It'll go to our review committee. Review committee will score it, look through everything on the actual application. It talks a little bit about the scoring process. We'll read through it, give it scores, and then get that signed off on who it is that's going to be allotted the grant. Reach out to those community partners saying, hey, thank you so much. Here's your notification, which starts the kind of notification process. That process says, here's what we need, here are all the forms to be signed, here's what has to be submitted with this application, or now with this notice to intent. once we intend to contract. Once we get all of that information, there is a notice to proceed letter that comes out in about August, September. And that notice to proceed letter is really that indicator that, yes, the grant is up, ready to go. And so that's the letter that'll be kind of that final step. And so during this process, there's a lot of communication with our KC Water Education Outreach Program to make sure that we're kind of keeping in touch about what's needed, timelines, anything that is maybe missing, we'll reach back out. But this is a little bit about the timeline. And notice those asterisks mean that a lot of it is just dependent on, if there's a little bit of back and forth, if we're missing anything, or if it takes a little bit to get some information into us, that may just extend the process. So a little bit about what we are hoping to see with the applications is just really a well-written grant. What we hope is that people can really help us understand what it is that we're reading, the scope and the activities that target that water quality, because it is an education program, it is an education grant, really helping understand how that education then leads to the outcomes of what it is that people will be able to understand from that outreach effort. That you are providing a well-defined budget that kind of outlines here is where the money will be spent. Everything that you want to spend, make sure you're putting in that budget. Make sure you are really identifying where the funds are going. The more detailed a budget and the more detailed your activity and your scope, the better the committee is able to understand and assess the grant request. Same thing with the itemized list. Let us know what it is that you are wanting to purchase. That your goals are very clear, kind of the difference between outputs versus outcomes. Outputs just let us know, the number of people involved, the number of trash or items collected, the number of activities, versus outcomes where we're learning about behavior change. We're learning about how people are impacted, maybe some things that they're going to start to do differently. And so really focusing on how your outputs are helping your outcomes and how maybe you're measuring those outcomes are going to be really beneficial with helping the committee understand the intention of your grant. The last part is making sure that you are prepared to submit a final report. A final report has to be submitted no later than 60 days from the conclusion. So if you finish on a Friday and you're ready to submit your final report, a week later, we are happy to receive it as soon as possible. But again, you have 60 days from when your project or activity or event completes. And then again, the last 10% of your grant funds can't be released until we do get that final report. With the application process, there is kind of an outline of what it is we look for in that final report. So again, any questions, feel free to post those or feel free to reach out to our office. A couple other things, just making sure that you are downloading the current and most up-to-date 2023 grant application. The deadline is on Friday at 4 p.m. If you're going to email, I'd recommend not emailing at 3:59 because sometimes email may take a few minutes and we may get it not till 4:02. So we just want to make sure we're giving some cushion so that we get all those grants well by that deadline. One thing to really notice, the proceed with activities after fully signed grants, that's that notice to proceed letter. So that date on that notice to proceed letter will say you are now able to move forward from, and it'll list a specific date. So any activities, any events after that date is where we can provide the funding with the grant. Any events, activities that may happen before that date is where we cannot use grant funds for that. We are unable to provide support with that. So you want to make sure you're just looking at, once you get that letter, here's your start date, and then your grant activities can start following that notice to proceed letter. A little bit about the reimbursement process. They are paid through reimbursement that you send us your invoice. The invoice does have to have a number on it, a date on it. You do need to provide receipts. This grant is tax exempt. So when you go to purchase items, it does have to be tax exempt. If you need help or support with that, we can help you making sure that you're getting those tax exempt items. But we want to make sure that when you submit that receipt, that those taxes are not part of that request for funding. So again, feel free to reach out with any questions on that part. Ideally, you're going to want to reach out to us as often as you can for reimbursement, but we can definitely talk about what works best for your organization. And then a tracking sheet is ideal. So when you say, here's our budget, here's what we're invoicing for, just kind of here's what we requested, here's how much we've taken out, here's how much we have left, just so that we're all kind of on track with what's left in the grant, what's being used as provided by the budget and the scope. Next part, moving into understanding a city contract. And I'm actually going to let Leona talk about our city contract side of things. So thank you, Leona.
Thank you. So one can submit a grant application, but in order for us to execute the contract, the grantee needs to be a city vendor. And if you have done business with us before, then you should be okay. But if you're brand new, and I don't know what company you're with, Trevor, so I don't know. But if you're brand new, then the company will need to submit a city vendor application. River Relief. I think we've done business with them. Is Mary, do you know?
Yes.
We have, okay, then you guys should be okay. But if you weren't, then the city vendor application would have to be submitted and approved by the city, which is a different department than our departments, to get approved. If you want to go to the next part. Okay, so the contract will have two parts. Part one is where the information about the contract, the term, the dollar amount, other sections, insurance requirement, and signatures are. And then the part two is the standard terms and conditions. And it's lengthy and has a lot of information in there about various pieces of the contract. And so all that's in the RFP that was posted. So when the projects are awarded to the companies, they will get an intent to contract letter that I'll draft, and it'll be signed by somebody else, but I'll draft it. And it'll outline all of the items needed to be signed off and returned to the city. It'll have the whole set of the contract in there, all the parts, all the attachments, and it'll outline all the insurance requirements. And even a sample insurance certificate will be part of it. Big things that we run into are when people don't supply all of that information back, or they don't supply it back in the 5-day timeline we give. So insurance seems to be the biggest hiccup that we run into. Either the dollar amount requirements are not listed, or a big thing, they don't have the city of Kansas City listed, Kansas City, Missouri listed as an additional insured. So those are things that need to be handled. If you've done business with us before, you've had to go through this. So whether or not we ask you to revise anything, I don't recall. But those are big ones. Other things that we ask for are, if the contract exceeds $5,000, then an E-Verify form is needed, which is the employee eligibility verification affidavit, which states that all employees are eligible to work in the U.S. It's a Department of Homeland Security requirement. If your contract is less than $5,000, that's not required. All contracts, regardless of dollar amount, all the vendors have to be registered with the state of Missouri Secretary of State, which is what SOS stands for right there. And all the ones for this grant are nonprofits. So one of the categories for the corporation's Secretary of State classification is nonprofit. So it's typically a certificate we'll ask for, certificate of good standing. If by chance somebody does not supply it, there is a website we can look information up on. So those are the big parts that that we ask for. In the letter, I'll outline the attachments and what items specifically need to be returned in hopes of simplifying it. Is there anything next? Oh,
Any
that was it.
questions? Great. Well, thank you
he's
again for
typing.
joining us today.
Oh, Trevor was typing something. He said, none from me, thanks.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Leona. All
You're
right,
welcome.
well then I will go ahead and stop recording. Thank you again for joining us today.